My name is Jamie Cosgrove, Area Vice President for Salesforce Financial Services. I run one of our financial service business units at Salesforce for the central US and Canada. Very excited to be with you today. We've got an amazing panel of innovators, entrepreneurs, and people that are disrupting the market. So with that, when we have the guests come on. So Amanda, we'll start with you. I think just to sort of level set your business, right, is just a quick intro, you know, your target addressable market, the types of customers that you're going after, and sort of your call to action as it relates to the market of pursuit and acquisition.
Awesome. Hi. Jellyvision is the spawn of a gaming company best known for making video games in the 90s like You Don't Know Jack and Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But instead of creating virtual game show hosts, we create virtual advisors. Most famously, a platform called Alex that helps mostly large employers help their employees choose and use their benefits. 1 out of 4 millennials would rather clean a toilet than choose their benefits. So we use our gaming days, some tricks there, to make making smart financial decisions easy, palatable, digestible, and quick so you can get back to doing basically anything else in your life you'd rather be doing.
Hi, my name is Eddie Liu. I'm the CEO of ShiftGig. ShiftGig is a mobile marketplace that connects businesses with hourly workers. We call them specialists. Today, we focus in retail, hospitality, experiential marketing, and logistics and warehouse. So one example of ShiftGig is today at Techweek, 30 of our specialists is helping Techweek out. So we have 30 people here at the event registration and hosts and hostesses helping Techweek out. And we help businesses with labor augmentation, and we help people work when they want and work in a flexible manner.
Hi, I'm Justyn Howard, CEO of Sprout Social. We are a social media management software company. We work with roughly 19,000 brands around the world to help them build stronger relationships with their customers through social. Our customers span from the SMB up into the large enterprise as well as agencies, so very diverse customer base and businesses of all sizes and shapes.
My name is CJ Priswell. I'm the president and co-founder of Snapsheet. We build technology for auto insurance companies, specifically for the wonderful world of auto insurance claims. We sell primarily to very large enterprises, some of the largest financial and insurance institutions in the country and in the world. So we have deal with a lot of big corporate sales.
That's awesome. We were talking about it a few minutes ago, but I think what I love about this cross-section is there's a real big cross-section of sort of the segments that these organizations are going after and penetrating from a B2B and B2B2C perspective. So sort of let's start with the customer perspective as it relates to customer acquisition. So we're here today to talk about that B2B and B2B2C customer acquisition. Amanda, I'll start with you. What did your early attempts at customer acquisition look like? You touched on it just now briefly. Obviously, coming from gaming, it's a big shift to benefits. But what did you learn from that early journey that you're applying today?
The biggest lesson we learned from our early days, especially when you're selling to large enterprise, is you think you want to go after company X as company Y, but really it's people selling to people. To be able to land a giant logo, you need to find the innovator inside the company who's most likely to be open, particularly to a small company, versus buying from IBM, where nobody gets fired for buying from IBM. When you're a small company, it is a people-to-people sale, no matter the size of the organization you're trying to get into.
Thanks. Eddie?
Yeah, so our sales has evolved over time. Initially, we sold with small businesses in Chicago, and today we're selling to the largest retailers and the largest hotels across the country. I remember 3 years ago when we met with one of the large food service companies, Sodexo. They basically said, "Hey, when you're in 20 cities, come back and talk with us." And so it took a while for us to try to grow and migrate from a small sale to a large enterprise sale.
Justyn, how about yourself?
So when we first launched Sprout, we weren't building for any particular customer segment. I think most people sort of lumped us into SMB, and that's certainly where a lot of early traction was. But our approach was the customer, or the problems as they relate to social media that small businesses face are the same as large businesses face, just different scale, a little bit different complexity. So we set out to build great software without a lot of focus and attention on where that business was coming from. So as we were acquiring customers, and over time we realized, okay, we've got 8,000 SMBs, and we've got 3,000 agencies and all these enterprise customers, et cetera. So as the product evolved from being kind of segment agnostic, we started to get to the point where we could effectively start to speak specifically to the different segments that we have. So today we have a very, very segmented business in that each of those segments that I mentioned account for about 25% of our business. So we've got resources pointed kind of equally throughout our organization across those. Some of them have a lot of similarities, some of them are very different. So it's kind of like 4 sales and marketing organizations within one, which is pretty interesting.
Were there any surprises in that evolution?
I think one of the biggest things that we learned was by starting agnostic and not thinking too hard about, okay, we want to go sell to big enterprise and it's going to be long sales cycles and long deployments and things like that. The learning after the first 4 years was these enterprise customers are actually incredibly inexpensive to acquire. You acquire them, as Amanda said, you're selling to people, so you can acquire them in many of the same ways. So we ended up, without ever saying we're going to go sell to the enterprise, before we knew it, we had 2,000 of them using the product, and with amazing unit economics, similar to what we saw in the SMB, et cetera. So that was kind of an accidental, I think, benefit of the way we went to market. But once you get the muscle memory around acquiring those enterprise customers with the same kind of unit economics that you can in the SMB, it's pretty awesome for business.
CJ, how about yourself? Kind of early attempts to lessons learned?
I'll have the scrappy entrepreneur story. So, we pivoted our company. We were a business-to-consumer brand selling to body shops. And it turns out that, most of the body shops get paid by insurance companies. So we decided to go take a stab at insurance, but we didn't know anyone. So it just turns out that the president of the largest body shop chain lives here in Chicago. So we convinced him to fly to LA with us to vouch for us at a meeting with the number 6 largest insurance carrier in the country. And we just had to buy him a dinner at Ruth's Chris. He paid for his own flight there and everything. And he closed our first deal for us. So, you got to be a little creative, I guess, sometimes, and, think outside the box to try to win the business. We walked in there with we didn't even have an app yet. We had an app that looked like an app. It was screenshots, and I'd press the button and just flip it. So it looked like it was going to the next screen. And it won, so.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more comment. In the early days, the founder sold, the early executives sold, but we didn't have a marketing team, we didn't have a data team, and everybody was just trying to sell our first couple customers. Today we have a marketing team, and we use case studies, and we use social media. We have a data team, so we have a data-driven sale. We have an inside sales team, we have a local team, we have a national team. So it's much more complex. We're going after more sophisticated buyers. So it's evolved over time. It's a more complex sales, and trying to get bigger deals.
Yeah, and we'll talk in just a second about some of the implications that it has on talent recruitment. But go ahead.
I just want to throw in, our first named customer was Comcast. So we started with the jumbo employer because we really deal in complexity, we reduce complexity. And one of the things we thought is how small market can we go? It's hard to get into these whales, but once you're in, they pay a lot of money and they don't churn because change is hard. So we thought, we'll take our thesis and bring it down market. And what we found was that pricing sensitivity rose much faster than there were actually efficiencies in sale. Meaning you still had to go through procurement. You still had to have a multi-decision maker pitch, multiple meetings, multiple roadblocks. So it's very interesting as you're defining your market. There are a lot of behavioral characteristics of mid-market that make them hard to sell to, but there's definitely more budget sensitivity than the true jumbo enterprise. And that's why data is so important. You've got to constantly analyzing what is your return on investment for your cost of customer acquisition.
That's great. So I think traditionally, it's a pretty well-known fact that the cost and time to acquire new customers is greater than an upselling existing customers. So, Justyn, I'll start with you. When you think about sort of the customer journey from sort of marketing to new customers, so that brand awareness up to educating your customers on what you do and what the value proposition is, up to, hopefully closing a deal, what does that sort of journey look like in your organization?
So First, I'll say we have distinct teams assigned to net new business and existing business, existing customers. And the way that kind of evolved for us is initially it was just a small sales organization and customer service. And then over time that became a slightly larger sales organization, customer service, and customer success. And customer success was largely focused on just adoption and customer happiness. All pieces of that evolved, and today what it looks like, we have a large sales organization, we have a moderately sized customer support team, and then we've got a large success organization. So at some point we hit this tipping point where our existing customer base at 19,000 organizations probably has in any given month more opportunity in it than any net new business that we can generate. So another evolution that we had within that part of the organization is we still care very much about adoption and success of the customers. We also have an obligation to our customers to be talking to them about what's new, about what our product can do for them that they may not be leveraging yet, about what it might look like to bring additional teams into the product. So this revenue opportunity is coupled with an obligation to our customers. If we're not letting them know what we can do for them, we're not being real good partners. So we've assigned a lot of resources and time and energy around the growth piece of that business. For us in particular, and I don't know that this is true across a lot of SaaS businesses, but mitigation of churn is not a huge priority. It happens largely in the SMB. Companies go out of business, the decision maker leaves, et cetera. It's very expensive to save $1 of churn if we're not actually adding value to that customer. It's much more efficient to go in and find the opportunities where we can grow the existing customers. Couple that with the net new business, and you've got a pretty good cycle.
So there's a couple of groups here and organizations that sell to heavily regulated industries and customers. CJ, maybe start with yourself. Like how is that how does the regulation-driven sort of that evolution for you guys on how you acquire customers?
Yeah, I mean, so we play in a pool of like 400 or 500 clients, and 75% of all the volume we're going after resides within 30 accounts, right? So, regulation is very important. We have to be regulatory compliant in every state, and there's 50 states and 50 regulations. So for us, it was really more about, look, we could get access to the top 30 decision makers at these companies and get them to know who we are. But it's, we deal with like their largest expense. There's like hundreds of billions of dollars spent on auto indemnity. So if we screw up or do something that's not compliant, they're in big trouble, and they're the ones who are going to get sued, not us. So we had to go in there and really like win a couple accounts that had innovative people that would let us in, but then prove that we could do things correctly and do it, within the bounds of the law. And then once the data started pulling through, then we could actually take those data points to more of the other customers and say, look, we actually know how to do this. We can do this well and consistent for you. So it's it makes it regulation it's very tough because you can't just go in there and pitch vaporware. You have to show with the numbers, which then increases your sales cycle significantly, right? Because especially in auto insurance, like a year's worth of data is like nothing for them, right? So you got to get 2, 3, 4 years worth of data, and it just takes time.
Amanda, any thoughts on the same question?
I think brutally complex industries and regulation create an opportunity where you can out-teach your competition simply by translating the mess of government regulation into clearly understood English. Because sometimes really, really, really smart people at really, really big companies don't know what they're supposed to do. So a very large part of our marketing efforts are saying, what's the latest in the ACA? What's the latest in Trump Care? What are the implications? And we will break down very, very complex topics into very, very simple, easy to understand, this is what it might mean for your business. And by creating that thought leadership, then people are more open to us when we come in and ask for a meeting about a potential sale. So if you can create the ability to out-teach or out-explain, you will have a better chance that a prospect will pick up your call when you actually have a request in mind.
Thanks for that. So we talk at Salesforce a lot about sort of the way we operate in our personal lives with apps, driving sort of the expectations now in the business world. So Eddie, I'll start with you. So how have you seen your customers' expectations change based on some of those dynamics kind of over time in your company?
So our customer, we have actually several customers in the business enterprise. We're mobile first. So on the worker side, we're mobile only. And on the enterprise side, we're both mobile and web. And people that use the app to hire workers typically use the app, and people that end up paying our workers, an accountant or the payables, will typically use web. And so we think of it from the perspective of the person using the tool. But what we found is when we show our technology to the client, whether it's the end user or whether it's corporate, when they look at the user interface and they look at the user experience, they're super excited because we take it from a consumer UX perspective, whereas a lot of our competitors, whether it's a traditional staffing company that doesn't have tech, or whether it's a development firm that's kind of web only, and it's just kind of older interface, they just don't have the same consumer feel that you might be using on a Lyft or consumer technology.
For sure, there's a difference in our business. When we first started selling, I was frontline, and we were selling to early adopters. And they would want to see how the sausage was made. They didn't mind lumps and bumps. They wanted to be first. And they cared so much about the pain they were trying to solve, they'd take real risk, like working with a small company, a startup. Flash forward, 7 years later, we have 850 mostly enterprise customers, and they are not early adopters. Selling to mid-market, it needs to be cleaner, it needs to be tighter, you need to have tons of social validation, there's no risk. It's a very different stage once you have traction in how you sell to mid-market, like middle movers versus early adopters. It's a different sale. You look for different titles. Like a lot of our work is finding the person we're selling to on LinkedIn. When you're selling innovation, you look for someone who has tons of references for early stage startups, people who read lots and follow lots of innovators. For mid-market, you look for people with more normative job titles, but it is a big shift in how you approach the market once you're established and people want less risk.
Justyn, thoughts?
Yeah, so the concept of kind of consumerization of the enterprise, as it's often referred, is interesting for us on a couple fronts. The first is our busiest salesperson by far is our product, right? Virtually all of our revenue comes from people trying our product. They come to the website, they sign up, they try it. So from that perspective, we've got to focus a ton on the elegance of the first user experience, and that's usually maybe not the buyer. It's certainly not the executive that's signing off on the deal, so we have to be very conscious of what our end users are experiencing. The other thing is, in our space in particular, users will revolt if it's difficult to use. If it doesn't behave like, for us being built on top of social platforms, there's a precedent, right? People are used to how Twitter works and how Facebook works and things like this. And if we're not giving them a consistent experience, or at least something that looks and feels like what they're used to, they're simply not going to use it. So we could sell all day to the decision maker and check a bunch of boxes. If it's not elegant and it doesn't get the job done, we haven't done our job. So we've focused a lot more on the front end user experience, both in terms of that free trial process, as well as ultimately we need to make the people behind the keyboards jobs easier, as much as the person who ultimately signed the order.
CJ?
Yeah, and we have a heavy focus on the consumer because we're a business-to-business, truly B2B2C play. So, we white label our technology for these big auto insurance carriers, and they send it to their customers when they get into a car accident. And even our call center kind of acts on behalf of the carrier. So absolutely everything we do has to be focused on the consumer, because if we screw it up, then we screw up that big insurance carrier's brand that's like paying billions of dollars for TV ads. So we learned early on that, our mobile application and that technology is really important from a user experience, and we were able to really out-innovate the carriers. But our back-end infrastructure is like absolutely critical to driving the services. So you've got to be able to track every single thing that's happening through a customer through their journey. Even for us, like going to a body shop and getting the car repaired, like what's that interaction like? So a ton of our technology is it's kind of like an iceberg, right? Underneath the hood, we leverage like the latest technology to make services work better. And look, we operate in a very largely service-driven industry here in the U.S. So I think, there's not enough attention paid to like the power that software can play for services, especially when like what we're doing, something that was traditionally a person-to-person interaction, like just throwing a mobile app at somebody and being like, you figure it out, customer, right? I know you got into a car accident one every 10 years. Like, go take pictures and you'll be okay. So the technology has to kind of feel like somebody's watching over their shoulder. It's really difficult to do. But if we don't do it well, we won't win our big clients, right? So every single thing we do is focused on what is that every constituent, from the adjuster to the customer to the body shop, what's their experience and how does our software track it and make sure that it's perfect every time.
So you guys have all kind of talked about customer experience and engagement. So like, can we just spend a couple of minutes kind of talking about how you guys get that feedback? Like, what is your feedback mechanism, and sort of how are you finding ways to sort of address the customer demands, the customer requirements, sort of where they want to take the feature functionality, or just sort of solve a problem for them? So maybe, go ahead.
So we're fortunate in that we have a ton of inputs, right? So we've got all these different businesses, very diverse from the SMB up through large enterprise. So we have a ton of inputs, and we're collecting those all the time. So we do customer surveys that are pretty in depth on an annual basis. We have all of our inbound support tickets. We have all of our sales discussions. All of that data gets put into kind of a single repository where we're kind of tabulating what's going on. All of our executives review that. So even if you're not directly involved in building the product, you're understanding what the customers are asking for. And then we add sort of our own sort of secret sauce around prioritization and what we think is going to move the needle the most for our customers. The other thing that is really valuable, I think, for our customers as it relates to that volume of input is because we have so many signals and so many pieces of input, we often see trends and signals that an individual customer or group of customers wouldn't see in isolation. But we're able to put those together and form what looks to be a trend, and we can help them see around corners a little bit, help them understand what's coming, and build for what we expect to be the next 3 to 5 years of social adoption within the organizations.
And is that driving, just for you specifically, right? So there's obviously a lot of momentum around IoT and bots and artificial intelligence. Is that, obviously you guys are specifically launching a product kind of around that space. So are you using some of those data inputs to sort of drive that?
Yeah, so we'll look for those signals, and that kind of helps us decide what to build. In the case of the bots, that was something that we co-developed with Twitter, and it was what we saw to be a very forward-looking sort of bit of business. But then what we'll do, so once we've got the signal, then we'll go back out into the market with our customers. We'll talk to them about what they would want to do with those things, how they would see interacting with it. We put a beta version in front of them, get their feedback. We do a bunch of user testing. So the users are involved kind of at all phases of that until what we launched yesterday, for example, makes it to market. It's had a lot of rounds with customers, from the internal input to the kind of the polishing.
Okay. Amanda?
We have mostly large accounts. You know, our average customer contract value is 6 figures. So we put feet on the street, more or less, and we do pulse surveys and we do quarterly business reviews. And our strategy is give to get. We try to go in and say, we're going to teach you about your employees. We're going to benchmark your plans versus other companies like yours. We always try to give to get and then ask questions. But the one lesson I'll offer about listening to customers is there is a giant difference sometimes between what they say and what they do. And it's very important to get those sort of social anthropological insights into what they do. What are they spending money on? What are the priorities? What will they get fired if it doesn't happen, compared to what is nice or what sounds good? Because we have made big feature bets based on what sounded like a good idea to customers, but because it wasn't prioritized, there weren't dollars already there wasn't an already we are doing X about this, it did not get traction in the marketplace. So when you're becoming a student of customer, as best you can, ask questions around, where is your budget going? What are your quarterly priorities? What is your team working on? Not just, would you like this? Does this sound good? Does this solve a problem? Because it's the do. That's where the money is.
Yeah, so we use a Net Promoter Score quarterly, and so we get feedback that way. Our account management teams and sales teams will talk to clients, and we'll bring product in, and the product teams will get a lot of feedback, either directly from the clients or through our account management and sales teams. And then we have the executive team will either meet with sales and product, but we also have quarterly business reviews too to get a lot of feedback and prioritize a lot of our product roadmap and features in a very similar way that Amanda and Justin mentioned.
Maybe same question that I asked Justyn. So how are you using those data insights in the product or in your engagements? I mean, is it being embedded into some of the products?
No, of course.
Yeah.
I think both the product, but also, how we get feedback and how we do customer service too.
CJ, how about yourself?
So, I mean, I echo what Amanda said. I mean, we don't listen to our customers a lot because they don't know what they want, and like if they were really good at it, they'd be designing what we do, right? So we kind of listen to their problems and what their issues are, and we use our account management team for that. So the account management team's in there responsible for understanding what the customer's input and what their pain points are, but then we figure out how to build the technology around that. A lot of times, especially when you have these really big, massive clients that have like massive market share, they're going to come try and dictate to you what you should build, and you can fall into that rat's nest, and we've done it in the past where you're just building feature after feature after feature. We did this for one really large insurance carrier, and it never went anywhere, and they ended up like dropping us, and so it was like really detrimental to the team. So we're careful about that. We also have we do touch the consumer, so all the consumer feedback, we get a net promoter score from everyone, and if it's below a certain number, we ask for feedback. That all gets fed back to the management team and we have that consumer support team in the account management team, so it can actually feed directly to us, to the account managers, go back up to the accounts if there's actually an issue going on, and then we use our account management team to help kind of drive the innovation into the product group. So we like having all of like the consumer and the customer feedback funnel through the account management team rather than through like a support or an ops team.
And one little bit of advice there, particularly when you go talk to customers, and we do listen to our customers, it's important to write down what they said and remind them of it 6 months later. You had said this was important, and we built it. You had said this was important, and we didn't build it because of X, Y, and Z, or it's prioritized for the next release. But having the ability to show your customers that you're remembering and taking into account what they said is where the value is, and they'll appreciate, no, we didn't build it because it would compromise the stability of the platform, or no, because we prioritized this instead. It's a great way to build relationship over time. Like, being heard is of value for customers.
Thanks. CJ, just a kind of a follow-up question. Obviously, I'm very familiar with the insurance space, not necessarily the most progressive in many cases. Do you find are they generally coming to you with a preconceived notion of what they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to change their customers' experience, or are you driving a lot of that strategy for them?
I think these days we end up driving a lot of the strategy. I mean, I think overarching, there's a big push, I think in a lot of the big corporations, just for quote-unquote innovation and customer centricity and customer engagement. So I think these executives get tasked with a lot of these initiatives, but they have no idea really how to go handle it because they've been working within the same company and industry forever. So in the early phases, we actually 4 or 5 years ago, we listened, we got a lot of feedback from the customer. We had some innovative customers that told us what they wanted. Now we work with such a broad cross section that we really go in as the experts, and we try to meet their business objectives and help them look good to their senior management with the minimal amount of work that they actually have to do for themselves. So we say, look, we've got this platform packaged up. Here's how it works really well. But the big thing you'll run into in some of these big companies too is they don't want out of the box. They want something tweaked here or there. And then, it can be a year where you're like, look, that may not work. And then you have to track all the data and then benchmark them against the rest of the industry and kind of help slowly evolve the machine towards, why the out of the box solution works really well. And that's probably the biggest thing that we run into with these big companies is like everyone wants it a little different in their process. And we try to say, this is a customer experience. You have to let them go through this journey end to end or else they're going to get confused.
Amanda, I'll start with you. I want to shift gears a little bit to specifically the sales, your sales organizations and your marketing organizations. So can you just help the audience understand sort of how you're structured as an organization to go to market, sort of things direct, indirect, hunters, farmers, distribution models, those types of concepts?
The best way to describe the way our organization is structured is by a predictable revenue by Aaron Ross, rather. We follow that playbook pretty much to a T. We have a marketing team of about 7 people. Largely, they try to out-teach the competition. They do outbound. They do content syndication. But the real driver of our business is a team of 28 business development reps who just hit the phone and call large companies all day, and they get them on the phone and they get meetings. Then we have account executives. We've taken an account-based approach to sales. It used to be territory-based, and now it's named account based approach, and we have account managers working to get prospects signed, and then once signed, they move over into customer success that is responsible for making sure our software is properly implemented and that employees are actually using it, and then learning about each organization and creating new ways for upsell, additional product sell, and customer retention. So it's a very traditional, predictable revenue playbook.
CJ, how about yourself?
We probably don't do this as well as we should because we have such a small market. So I just hired a marketing person 2 weeks ago. After being in business for 6 years, it made sense, right? But we do a lot of like going to I have one salesperson. We go to trade shows and like talk at industry events and stuff, and then we have a lot of account managers. So when we close a sale, it's good to it's easy to kind of get in the door, but then it's more for us about curating and upselling and trying to drive more activation. So we focus a lot of our effort on our account management team. But now we're kind of getting to the point where hopefully we'll develop some really good practices of how to do this, but it's kind of TBD how we're going to structure the sales and the marketing organization, how that'll flow into the account management team.
Eddie, how about at ShiftGig? What's the structure of the sales and marketing organization?
Yeah, so we have about five people in marketing, and their primary job is client lead gen, and so it's either awareness or lead gen. So we have warm leads for the sales team. On the sales side, we have a national team of 5 people going after the largest national accounts in retail, hospitality, experiential marketing, and logistics warehouse. We have about 20 biz dev people that are closing a local Walmart or local Hyatt or local food service company. And that could be inside and that could be local. So we have people across the country. And then we have about 20 account managers whose job is to kind of grow market share once we're in a local venue. And so we have hunters and farmers.
Okay. Justyn at Sprout?
So our sales organization, sales and marketing organizations are pretty interesting in that the marketing team, so I mentioned earlier, most of our business comes from people trying our software, and that all is generated by the marketing organization. So the marketing team is I'm going to estimate at about 30 to 40 folks. And that's organized into what we call acquisition marketing, which is all the folks responsible for getting people into the door, into the trial. We have brand marketing, we have customer marketing, we have events, we have a lot of different disciplines within the marketing organization. So that organization today is responsible both for filling the top of our funnel directly, as well as brand awareness and those sorts of things. Once those leads are in the door, they get assigned to the sales organization. The sales team is currently organized. I alluded to earlier, we have an SMB organization, we have corporate, we have enterprise, we have agency, we have VAR and partner and channel as well. So the sales team is organized in that fashion. The vast majority of that team is responsible for taking those trials. We do in the neighborhood of 10,000 businesses in any given month that try our software. Based on their characteristics, based on their segments, they get assigned to that sales organization. That sales team is responsible for making sure that first 30 days and beyond is a success for the customer, that we're digging into their problems, that we're making sure that it's a good fit for them. We also have sales development and business development teams. Those efforts are a little earlier. I'd say we've been at that piece of the business for about a year or so. So those teams are responsible for taking the business that's not necessarily a trial yet. It might be a white paper download. It might be someone who signed a web form or attended a webinar, nurturing those until they become a customer. And then the most recent part of that effort is just actual outbound business. So we've historically, everything's been coming to us, and the area where we see the next bit of big scale for our organization is that outbound business. What does it look like to just give a talented rep a list of people to call and generate business that way? And then, sorry, this is turning into a long answer, but it's a complex organization. And then on the success side of the organization, we're organized by the size of the account. So our top accounts are assigned to one team, and then it kind of pyramids down from there. And then we've got another part of the organization, the CDAE team, which is responsible for growth and revenue within our existing customer base.
No, it's good to get the varying degrees of maturity in the business and understand kind of from a sales and marketing perspective sort of how you've evolved. So, Amanda, I want to ask you a question. You spoke specifically, and for everybody else as well, You spoke specifically about sort of your inside sales organization and being account focused. Sort of what demands has that put on you from sort of like, where do you find talent? What sort of talent are you guys looking for? I know your brand specifically, if you go to your website, you guys have a very sort of culture-centric view of that. But can you help us understand like where you look for talent, what sort of characteristics you're looking for to sort of up-level that conversation?
So we think people buy from people they like, and salespeople aren't necessarily likable. Like, it's not like, oh, I'm in sales, great, I'm going to take your call. So we rather than no, we have put a big priority on, from an SDR perspective, a BDR perspective, teaching you sales. So we find likable people with proof of grit and grind. We like farm workers, people who have muscled through sports, someone who's been really, really good at, an instrument. Show me that you've done something for a long time, even when it probably wasn't fun. And then we will teach you how to do strategic sales to enterprise, where you actually add value to customers. So we rather than trying to find and sort of grab from other companies' talent, we look for top schools and proof of grind, and we teach you the fundamental of sales. And then we have a mix. We have a lot of grown talent now doing, $1 million plus quotas in enterprise sales, and we've also hired externally as well. But we really want sales to be helpful. We're a challenger shop. We believe in challenger sale, but we want sales to be strategic, and sometimes that's easier to teach than it is to find.
It's an interesting concept. So has that evolved? Has that strategy evolved, or has it always been from the outset?
No, it's when our sales team grew from 1 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 52 people. And when you're growing that quickly, you hire a lot and you make a lot of mistakes. So thank you for that. And we've learned a ton and really have started to say, now we have infrastructure to say, this is the playbook, this is how we want to sell. We now have a sales enablement arm. We've been able to make some investments that come with scale, and it is easier to find potential and train them up than it is to find people who do sales the way we want to do sales.
Eddie, how about for yourself? What do you look for from a talent perspective, and where do you look?
I mean, specifically sales. I mean, today we have a super experienced and national sales lead from Career Builder, as well as an inside sales lead. So I defer to them in terms of the people that they hire, because we're getting awesome talent. And historically, though, when I've had a chance to interview our salespeople, we've looked for a lot of people that are competitive, and the desire to constantly win, to serve the client, but also kind of to have a kill, win the client, and then want to win the next client. And so oftentimes people that have a competitive attitude and thrive in that kind of environment.
I'm going to hit on that. That's exactly what I don't want. I don't want someone in sales to be excited that someone else lost a deal so that they win. We really have a culture of like learning and shared success. If you did something that worked well, teach your peers, because we're going to win as a team. And there's a lot of that like hunter take all. It doesn't work. So it's easier for us to train it up than to do that.
So I did play soccer and basketball, and they're very much team sports. And so you can be competitive in a team environment.
So there we go.
I would say teamwork was something that Mike Schaefer and Andrea Wagner and Jill Erickson, our Chief Revenue Officer, thrives by, but there's a way to be competitive in a team environment. So.
Yeah, I want to be them, not us. That's how I look at it.
How does that translate, just to kind of pull the thread a little bit? So how does that translate from a comp plan perspective? Do you compensate that way as well?
So I read Drive by Daniel Pink, and it talks about how commissions are derivative and they make you lose motivation. And then I had to go hire like 30 salespeople in a year, and I knew we'd never not be able to pay commissions. So we absolutely pay commissions. Everyone else in the company is based on a total company performance bonus pool where people participate if the company does well, but sales is absolutely individual performance based. But we have, notions that you need to be collaborative, you need to be helpful. If you're not constructive from an attitude and cultural perspective, it doesn't matter what your numbers are, you're not going to have a seat at Jellyvision.
Thanks, Justyn. How about for yourself? So how is that your strategy shape the type of people, where you get them from, what you're looking for?
So where we are today, I'd say that we've got a couple different strategies, right? So with our enterprise organization, it's going to look very different than our SMB or BDR. I'd say some general rules. Our best hires come from referrals. We are, whether it's from our sales leadership or other people in the organization, we talk a lot about who are the best salespeople we've ever interacted with, and we do what we can to hire those people. We're primarily looking for excellence in some fashion, thinking about whether it's been in a previous sales career or a successful athlete or things like that. A desire to learn. I think if you come in the door with all the answers, you're not going to do very well at Sprout. And just people that we think are people, A, that we want to work with, and as a byproduct of that, people who our customers are going to get value from.
Thanks. CJ, when you made your marketing hire, what did that look like?
No, I have a sales guy. I have one sales guy.
Just kidding.
He's 55. He lives in New Jersey, and he has a mullet. He drinks Miller Lite, and he closes deals. So
Nice.
I wouldn't use me as like the resounding, example of how to hire salespeople. But again, that's just indicative of our industry. But what's more important for us is actually our account management team and the upsell. So what we do with that is we hire really smart, and a lot of athletes up straight out of school to work in our customer support team, which is kind of like a hybrid call center customer support organization. We really just grind them for a couple years, like really being close with the customer, the end customer. And then the kind of the cream rises to the top, and we take those folks and we promote them up into the account management team I mentioned before. Then they start on the front line of actually handling the customer complaints directly and feeding that in the account management team. And then we graduate them to account management and eventually up to help with business development and upsell and things, right? So we kind of try to bring that up organically because we're in a complex industry. So, hiring people purely from the outside would take a lot of training and be kind of complicated. So we bring in a lot of smart folks and then help boost them up in the org.
So, Justyn and CJ, I'm going to ask you guys to vote on which side of the aisle. Do you believe in competition or democracy when it comes to the sales?
Wait. I heard athletes and I heard athletes. So either team athletes or individual athletes.
I think it's actually a really interesting distinction, and I think that there is absolute merit in people who want to be top performers and want to excel. Without a few of those on your team, or hopefully as many as possible, I don't think you're going to reach your potential. But there's also very much, and with a great sales leader, you'll find this, there's very much a team component to, we just want muscle memory of winning. We just want to get in the habit of winning, of beating our numbers. If I may not do it this month, but the rest of the team does, I can still feel really good about that. And the right sales leader will create that culture. So it's competitive against, I guess, the collective mission, but also some desire to, I want to be the best. And I think you mix those things together, you get pretty good results. I don't know which side that falls on, but that's.
I was just trying to pick a fight. That was a great answer.
Yeah.
We'd be more democratic about it, I guess, because we just don't like losing. It's not necessarily that like we love winning. We just hate losing. So it's kind of more of like a team effort to never lose.
And the point I was trying to make is we got that $5 million of net new ARR with lone wolves. We did. You get a couple people who can put up big numbers and you get there. If you want to predictably do 15 to 20 million of net new ARR, you need a team. And what you need multiple individual contributors who are helping each other out and having collective wins. It's not a handful of people that get you the big numbers. And that's the big shift is like, how do we get our best to teach our others? And have them incented to do that instead of having competing internally and wanting others to not do as well.
So do your 50 people get commissioned together, or do they get commissioned individually?
No, they're commissioned individually, and yet the leaders still are our best teachers because we said it's important and we stand by it.
It's very interesting dialogue, and I think I personally have been part of organizations that have done both successfully and unsuccessfully, and it had nothing to do with me. Just want to. We've got about 10 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about sort of inspiration and advice. So, Justyn, I'll start with you. Where do you look? Where does the organization look for inspiration as you're thinking about growing your business, growing your base? Where do you look for inspiration?
I think that there are certainly some contemporaries in our space that we look to, organizations, specifically SaaS organizations before us, who have great models and experiences that we can look after. I think something that's core to our DNA, though, is we want to distill that. The same way we want to distill what our customers are asking for and apply our expertise and turn that into something that's meaningful in our products. We want to do that with how we structure our organization and what our processes look like and things like that. So my honest answer is a lot of my inspiration I think comes from the team internally. I think if you pose good questions to the team and you've got a creative team that wants to contribute, you're going to get some pretty awesome things. And if you're careful not to kind of blindly adopt the status quo in the way that Salesforce did it or the way that these other organizations did it, but think about what is going to make this special for us and what does our version of this look like. Those kinds of processes and approaches have probably been our most successful.
Yeah. Amanda, how about yourself? Inspiration?
Where do I get inspiration? I read constantly. I went to a liberal arts school, and I basically learned how to learn, and I study all the time. I read about a book a week. I wanted to learn about how to get HR for a company with 700 people, so I called HR people at all the companies I respect in Chicago and asked them to meet with me, and they literally all did. I met with your guy. I met with a bunch of guys and just said, how are you organizing? What do you wish you had done earlier? And so on. So I regularly have a student mindset, and that gives me a lot of inspiration. There's nothing at Jellyvision that can't be improved. And once you get over that and say, we acknowledge it and we're going to work to make things better, there's a lot that can be learned and a lot of inspiration that comes from just like studying business in general.
Eddie?
So I get inspired by the people here on stage, by the fellow entrepreneurs in Chicago that are doing great stuff. And I get inspired by the team, many who I see out here at ShiftGig. And come on, raise your hands, ShiftGig. Awesome. And I get inspired by our specialists, because we have 30 of them here working this event, but we have 20,000 across the country doing great stuff for the 2,000 businesses. And when you hear the stories of the impact that we're making, it's an awesome feeling to hear the social impact that we're doing as a business.
Awesome. CJ?
Yeah, I mean, very similar to everyone. We get inspired by a lot of our employees, and just kind of we're in a tough industry where you get beat up a lot, and there's not a whole lot of innovation in it. And so like we get inspired by just the small wins and doing something that the general public, it's not like TechCrunch worthy or that interesting out in the media, but we know that we just had a huge impact to an insurance carrier. We just made their adjusters like 6 times more efficient with one little change we did. And so then when that comes from an account manager who actually found a new niche that now the rest of the account management team can go sell. It's kind of like one of the greatest feelings. It's like what everyone's aspiring for. It's like find that next thing that's going to transform the rest of the account organization.
Thank you. So kind of just I've got one last question, and then we're gonna turn to social media here. So advice. What advice can you share to other early stage businesses trying to build a base, build a market? I'll start with you, Amanda.
So I have advice about partnerships. I had a CEO of a startup tell me once, well, partnerships don't work. I'm like, unless they do. Our business was built on a partnership. So I have 2 buckets of perspective to share. The first is when you're doing a partnership, typically as a small company with a large one, there are 2 reasons why they're going to work with you. One is your product is going to make them money. And the second is your product is going to help them make more money on their product. It's like somehow strategic. Most likely when you're small and nobody's heard of you and you don't have a lot of customers, you're going to live in bucket 2. Your product set makes their product set more valuable. So don't give away a bunch of margin. Hold on to your margin for those early sales. You need it to fund your business, and they don't need it. You don't actually make these giant partnerships money. So I see lots of 40% off the top deals. Don't do it. You are of strategic value when you're a startup. The second thing is, when you're trying to prioritize your time, there's this notion you go out and you get a big national partnership. You're going to go do a partnership deal, and you get the paper inked, and you exhaust yourself giving yourself a high five on the back. Don't. There's a difference between activity and productivity when it comes to partnerships. The national deal is just permission to sell in B2B. You get to regional, that's access to the sale. And the real money in partnerships is made when your salespeople meet their salespeople and build relationships. So having wasted a lot of time thinking I was going to make all this money, it is field activation of your sales leads and their sales leads. That's how you actually make money in partnerships. So it can be a great way to build a business. It just takes a lot of time and focus, and you've got to figure out where your best return on your time is, because that's the most valuable currency of any startup.
Well said. Eddie?
So I'll add to what Amanda said. And when you deal with large national clients don't have one point of contact. So we had one large national food service client, and our main point of contact was an expatriate from France, and she moved back to France. And our other point of contact, and who's an EVP, Ken Lee, changed companies, became a CEO of a different company. And so we lost 2 senior contacts, and we didn't have a relationship map. And so now what we're doing with all of our national clients is we're drawing a relationship map. We're having a champion coach, and at a corporate level, we're finding an economic buyer, probably the CFO or some senior finance person. We're having a regulatory buyer, and then we're going to have a relationship map across all of our local venues where we have contacts. So we're not going to have one point of contact.
Justyn?
I was watching the group form behind you, and I didn't hear the
Yeah,
question.
I thought I was on time.
I didn't hear the question.
Just advice that you would have
Oh,
for early stage companies looking to grow a base, grow a market.
yeah. Pay really close to unit economics very early on. Most of the advice you hear doesn't probably apply to you. Learn a lot. Care deeply about your team and care deeply about your customers. Find your North Stars and stick to them.
Reader's Digest version, CJ.
Develop very strong relationships with key people in your customers.
I want to thank everybody for their attention. I want to thank you for your generosity of answers and sharing with us a perspective. So just a round of applause for the panel.